Ronald Reagan capitalized on the public's frustration with Jimmy Carter. When he ran for the presidency against Carter in 1980, he asked Americans, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" With high inflation at 18%, the answer was no. Reagan, who was Republican, won a landslide victory. In addition, the Democrats lost the Senate for the first time since 1954. In his first term, he spoke out in favor of labor unions, escalated the war on drugs, and ordered an invasion of Grenada to reverse a communist coup. On March 30, 1981, Reagan, Press Secretary James Brady, Washington police officer Thomas Delahanty, and Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy were struck by gunfire from John Hinckley Jr. outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. Reagan does survive this attack. He's going to be reelected in a landslide in 1984. Publicly describing the Soviet Union as an evil empire, he supported anti-communist movements worldwide and escalated the arms race with the Soviet Union. In time, Reagan began negotiating with Mikhail Gorbachev, culminating in the decrease of both countries' nuclear arsenals. As Gorbachev moved toward reform within the Soviet Union and détente with the West, the conservative regimes of Eastern Europe were left on their own and began collapsing. By the end of 1989, the Berlin Wall had been smashed, marking the end of the Cold War, and communist parties in Poland, East Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria fell from power. The Soviet Union ended its existence in December 1991, when Russia and most other republics formed the Commonwealth of Independent States. At 2 a.m. on August 2, 1990, 80,000 Iraqi troops invaded and occupied Kuwait, touching off the first major international crisis of the post-Cold War era. Iraq's leader, Saddam Hussein, justified the invasion on the grounds that Kuwait, which he accused of intentionally depressing world oil prices, was a historic part of Iraq. This should remind you of what Hitler had said when he was starting his invasions, that he was just going after territory that historically was a part of Germany or that had large populations of Germans. Well, this is what Hussein is saying as well. The invasion caught the U.S. off guard. During the 1970s and 1980s, the U.S. and Britain, France, the Soviet Union, West Germany had sold Iraq an awesome arsenal that included missiles, tanks, and the equipment needed to produce biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. And they had done that in part because Iran was the bad guy at that point, and they had sold all of that stuff to Iraq, hoping that Iraq would side with them and help them against Iran. And now it's turned around in the opposite direction. With Iraqi forces posed near the Saudi Arabian border, the Bush administration, George Bush Sr. was elected president in 1988, sent 180,000 troops to protect the Saudi kingdom. In a sharp departure from American foreign policy during the Reagan presidency, Bush also organized an international coalition against Iraq, convincing Turkey and Syria to close Iraqi oil pipelines, winning Soviet support for an arms embargo, and establishing a multinational army to protect Saudi Arabia. Bush's actions reflected our vital interest. Iraq's invasion gave Hussein direct control over a significant portion of the world's oil supply, disrupted Middle East balance of power, and placed Saudi Arabia and other countries in that area in jeopardy. Bush went to the UN for a resolution permitting the use of forces against Iraq if it did not withdraw by January 15, 1991. Congress also gave Bush authority to wage war. The Allied ground campaign relied on deception, mobility, and overwhelming air superiority to defeat a larger Iraqi army. The strategy was to mislead the Iraqis into believing that the Allied attack would occur along the Kuwait coastline and border with Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, General H. Norman Schwarzkopf, American commander of the coalition forces, shifted more than 300,000 troops into western Saudi Arabia, allowing them to strike deep into Iraq. The war ended very quickly, but stopped short of ousting Hussein. In 1992, in a bitter three-way contest marked by intense assaults on the candidates' records and character, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton defeated George Bush and Texas businessman Ross Perot to become the first Democratic president in 12 years. During his first 2 years in office, he had a string of legislative successes. To reduce the federal budget deficit, he persuaded Congress to raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans and on gasoline and to cut government spending. To create jobs, he persuaded the Senate to ratify the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. To aid working parents, he signed parental leave legislation allowing parents to take unpaid leave during family emergencies, but he failed to get his health care plan through Congress. On February 26, 1993, a truck bomb was detonated below the North Tower of the World Trade Center, or the World Tower Center, in New York City. It was intended to send the North Tower crashing into the South Tower, bringing both down and killing thousands. It failed, but did kill 6 people and injured more than 1,000. In March 1994, 4 men were convicted for the crime. A religious group known as the Branch Davidians, a sect that separated from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, led by David Koresh, had taken up residence at Mount Carmel Center Ranch in the community of Elk, Texas, 9 miles east-northeast of Waco, Texas. The group was suspected of weapons violations, and a search and arrest warrant was obtained by the ATF. When they attempted to raid the ranch, an intense gun battle erupted, resulting in the deaths of 4 agents and 6 Branch Davidians. With that failure, a siege was initiated by the FBI, lasting from February 28 through April 19, 1993. Eventually, the FBI launched an assault and initiated a tear gas attack in an attempt to force the Branch Davidians out. During the attack, a fire engulfed Mount Carmel Center, and 76 people, including Koresh, died. Clinton suffered from allegations of financial and sexual misconduct before he became president, and that will reappear. Public support for Clinton grew after the congressional Republicans temporarily shut down the federal government in an effort to force budget cuts and tax reductions, and anti-government extremists Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols blew up the Alfred P. Moore Federal Office Building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, killing 168 people, including 19 children. McVeigh will be executed on June 11, 2001, and Nichols was sentenced to life in prison in 2004. McVeigh cited the Waco siege as his motivations for the bombing. The low point in Clinton's presidency began when he was accused of encouraging a 24-year-old White House intern, Monica Lewinsky, to lie to lawyers in a sexual harassment lawsuit about whether she had an affair with the president. For 7 months, the president denied that he had an inappropriate relationship with the intern, but ultimately acknowledged the relationship and admitted that he misled the American people about it. In December 1998, the House Judiciary Committee voted along straight party lines, approved 4 articles of impeachment, asserting that Clinton had committed perjury, obstructed justice, and abused his power. Later that month, the House of Representatives approved 2 articles of impeachment, making Clinton only the second American president to face an impeachment trial in the Senate. On the article charging the president with committing perjury before a grand jury, senators voted 45 guilty and 55 not guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, 50 senators voted guilty and 50 not guilty. A 2/3 vote was required for conviction and removal from office, and so he was not removed. Another terrorist attack occurred on October 14, 2000. The USS Cole bombing was a suicide attack against the U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyer while it was harbored and being refueled in the Yemen port of Aden. 17 U.S. sailors were killed and 39 injured. Al-Qaeda reclaimed responsibility. George Bush won the presidential election of 2000. This is the son of George Bush Sr. As president, he persuaded Congress to cut taxes, and after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, to authorize invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Over 3,000 people were killed in the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. On October 8, 2001, Office of Homeland Security is established, and on October 17, 2003, Saddam Hussein is captured, and 3 years later he is executed.